this meeting. So thank you all for participating today in the topic of sleep. This was a requested topic by many patients, and I know that it is something that is affecting a lot of people. So the objectives of today is we're going to talk about why we sleep, kind of what are our natural rhythms, how I chose today because daylight savings time is tonight, and we'll talk just briefly about that. A little bit about jet lag. Everybody is asking how much is the appropriate amount of sleep. We'll talk about some disorders, how drugs and diet influence our sleep, and then depending on how time is going, and I think we'll have enough time, we can talk about COVID and the holidays and kind of an update. It's important for everyone to know that we are just, this 30, 40, 50-minute conversation is the tip of an iceberg. Sleep medicine is a boarded specialty that takes 2 years of study, and there are physicians who just do sleep medicine. And sorry about that. I'm going to go backwards. So this really is a tip of an iceberg. And so what I thought we would do is just talk about the things that most people complain about, such as insomnia and jet lag. And we won't touch on sleep apnea and some of the other disorders. But to start with, why do we sleep? And what happens if we don't get enough sleep? When we go to sleep, I always tell folks, it's the time that we restore our energy that we had expended during the day, but it's also our mind's method of filing memories from the day or in the past into the little cabinets of our brain. And that's why sometimes you'll notice you'll rehash some thoughts in the middle of your night in the sleep and kind of wake up. And if we do have disrupted sleep, then those little memory episodes that we're trying to just organize in our sleep filter away. And so we do know that memory issues are a complication of lack of sleep. Also, studies have shown that we get an increase in depression, anxiety, high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, renal disease, weight gain, diabetes, if we don't get enough sleep. Irritability, we all know we get a little cranky if we haven't had a good night's sleep. And especially for children and teenagers who really can't pinpoint why they might be irritable, they develop problems with relationships with other kids or siblings, and if they don't get enough sleep. So sleep is a big issue from birth to demise, and affects different people at different stages. And so the National Sleep Foundation has recommendations for how to get it, what is the recommended hours of sleep based on age groups. And if you look at newborns, up to 17 hours, teens, 8 to 10 hours, if you're school age or preschool, even 13, 14, quite a bit of sleep is needed in our youth. Young adults and adults, 7 to 9 hours, but age over 65 is 7 to 8 hours. That is the current recommendation. They feel that studies are showing over 9 hours in adults over 65 may be too much. Now, over 90 years old, we may be reverting to some of the more hours needed. It's not surprising that we expend a lot more energy and we're not able to refuel ourselves as efficiently. So if you're over the age of 90, it won't be uncommon to need 10 to 13 hours of sleep. So, what happens when we sleep? We've reclassified stages of sleep and then REM into non-REM and REM sleep. And from the 5 stages, we've broken it down to 4 stages. I just want to touch that at each stage, your body is going through different things. So in the very first 5 to 10 minutes when you're awake to going to sleep, that's called non-REM or stage one. And it's not very long, maybe up to 15 minutes max. And then as you enter stage two, your body temperature drops, your heart rate starts to slow down, your brain starts to produce what we call sleep spindles, and they can see that on sleep tracings. And this stage and hormones start to be produced, and this lasts about 20 minutes. And then as you get into stage three, your muscles start to relax. The blood pressure and breathing rate drops and becomes more even. And stage three is when we have our deepest sleep. And it can last hours, or you can float between stage two and three a little. And then REM sleep occurs. And that's one that a lot of people are talking about because our brain becomes actually more active. But your body becomes more relaxed into almost an immobilized state. Dreams occur, and REM is rapid eye movement, and so eyes will move rapidly. And that's an active part of sleep, and it's an active part of our brain, and it's a very necessary part of memory building. And we can float between REM and stage three very easily. What happens when we don't go into all these stages of sleep, or where we can't, where we wake up in the middle of them for whatever reason, which we'll talk about, we then will develop different types of sleep disorders. And they most commonly are circadian rhythm disorders, which means our natural clock gets off. There are, in broad categories, problems with sleep include insomnia, sleep apnea, where you would stop breathing because of more of a mechanical structural issue. Our tongue would fall back and block off our airway. That's a simplistic manner of thinking about sleep apnea. And there's a whole host of other issues that result from that entity, which we won't be approaching today. Loud snoring. If we have nasal polyps or congestion or allergies, and if we snore loudly, we can actually wake ourselves up in between these stages of sleep just because we heard ourselves snoring. And then there's these disorders called hypersomnias, where sleeping too much. We won't touch on that. We're going to talk a little bit more about circadian rhythm disorders and a little bit about jet lag. We won't be able to go into details of everything, but I wanted everyone to understand what can happen when our 24-hour clock has been shifted, as it's going to happen today. There are some things called parasomnias, where sleep hallucinations, sleep behaviors can occur. And there's also like narcolepsy, which is a hypersomnia. There's sleep movement disorders, sleepwalking, sleep terrors, other aggressive behaviors in sleep that can occur. So this is a broad topic. We think that, oh, sleep is no big deal, but there is so many things that can happen and so many diseases and disorders that can happen with sleep, that it's important for you to know that not everybody who can't get a good night's of sleep can do all the same things. So what is a circadian rhythm? So circa, circle, means that things go around in a circle. In the circadian rhythm, we all have this biological clock. And all living creatures have this circadian rhythm based on the 24-hour cycle of the sun. And that is so important to keep in mind, that that is our nature's clock for plants, for animals, for bacteria, fungus, and the human body and our mind. And so if we look at what happens during our circadian rhythm, let's just start at when we want to go to sleep. Usually that's around the evening time. Well, let's start when we wake up, I think. Let's start at 8:30 in the morning. And that's bowel movements are likely. Because if it's, and that's a nice segue from last week's topic. Um, so if we were going to the bathroom and having bowel movements in our sleep, that would be a very, very disruptive situation. So our own nature's clock has it so that we should be having a bowel movement in the morning, and then we can move on with our day. Testosterone is secreted early in the morning around 9 a.m. And that's so that we can have our muscle activity so we can move and do everything we need to do. Remember the hunter-gatherers, they need to have their energy to get going, and or way back when to plow the fields and gather food, because that's the purpose of us, is to live. 10 a.m. to about the early afternoon, we have our highest alertness, best coordination, fastest reaction time. Until then, our greatest cardiovascular efficiency and muscle strength. And then we get down to the evening. Our blood pressure will peak. We get our highest body temperature in the evening time. And then around 9 p.m., after sunset and after it gets dark, melatonin secretion starts. And it takes about a couple of hours of melatonin to start forming for it to lull us to sleep. And we'll talk about melatonin further in the next slide. At about 11:30 at night, your bowel movement activity and your urges will be suppressed. Around 2 a.m., about 3 hours after the melatonin secretion starts, we form our deepest sleep. And around 4:30 a.m., and between 2 and 4:30 a.m., other hormones are starting to be produced in different strengths, and cortisol, GABA, our melatonin still continues to be secreted, so that way it helps maintain sleep. We remember in the last slide that our body temperature drops. Low body temperature in sleep is very important to keep the melatonin production going. And then at about 6:45, we get a sharp rise, like a sudden peak in our blood pressure. So a lot of you are checking your blood pressure the minute you wake up in the morning. We know that it's going to peak at that time before you've taken your medicines. But let's see what happens about an hour after that, or you take your morning pill. Because just because you've had this sharp peak, it doesn't mean it's going to be sustained. Now, the problem with this sharp rise in blood pressure, and it's received a lot of academic attention, is if you've already got high blood pressure and risks for heart disease and stroke, and then you peak your blood pressure higher. That's why we tend to now give a little bit of blood pressure medicine in the evening as well as in the morning, so that we can offset these peaks. So I know this is a lot of physiology in here and a lot of other disease conversations, but it's because we don't just shut down at night, and I think it's important for us to know. So let's talk about kind of this is a simplistic brain model on what happens with sunlight. As we mentioned, it helps us with our circadian rhythm. And it's very important, for us to see natural sunlight. It enters through our eyes and then through an organ in our brain called the hypothalamus. Sunlight regulates our 24-hour clock. And then it helps trigger it stops melatonin production during the day. Otherwise, we'd just be producing melatonin all day long and be sleepy. So when our eyes start seeing sunlight, then our melatonin production starts slowing down and our body temperature, serotonin, GABA all start getting affected. And then we will see improvement, more energy, mood, better night's sleep. So sunlight is important to regulate the clock for melatonin. If improving our circadian rhythm will dramatically improve our effect on mind, body, and mood. So even though this is a topic about sleep, getting enough sunlight during the day makes a huge difference in how we go to bed at night. So I know whenever people say, well, I can't get enough sleep at night, and I then move, what time do you wake up? Are your windows open? And everybody's like, what does that have anything to do with what's going on when I'm going to bed? It's because of this pattern and the hormones. So one way that we can help our body's melatonin natural production is, besides the sunlight, helping set the clock, is also getting fruits and vegetables that contain melatonin, or the amino acids that help us make melatonin. Tart cherries, corn, asparagus, tomatoes, pomegranate, broccoli, grapes, olives, cucumbers. All of these things are, except for the corn, are in the Mediterranean diet. Whole grains, nuts, and seeds all will help us with our melatonin production. So if you want to start enhancing your sleep at night, add these things into your dinner or an evening snack. So circadian rhythm disturbances, the very first circadian rhythm disturbance that we all have been impacted by is jet lag, because that affects our clock. And studies have shown that going from from west to east is easier than traveling east to west. But every hour of a time zone lag takes a day for us to adjust. So that's like our entire vacation to Europe, because of all the different time zones that we've crossed. So crossing from, say, New York to Los Angeles, you've crossed 3 time zones, which would be about a day of jet lag for each. So it would take us 3 days to recover from the jet lag going from east to west. So imagine going to Australia, or even, going to India. That one's just an upside down on our clock. And I can tell you I've experienced that. So if you're going to go for a short trip, just stay on your home time zone. That means if you're awake at 2 in the morning in India, just get up and just get on the computer and answer your emails back home, and then take a nap during the day and schedule that in your tour, if it's a short trip, or in your business trip. Now, I know we're not traveling a lot right now, so it doesn't seem like that big a difference. If it is a prolonged trip, one recommendation that I have is, when you are on the plane traveling, know that the flight attendants are just using that 8-9 hour clock for what they want on that flight. And so they want to feed you, give you some alcohol, have you sleep for the duration, and then wake you up so when you arrive. And that's their pattern. Now they are starting to become more flexible and saying you can order your meals when you like. So depending on when you get on that plane, my recommendation is to set your plane time to the destination. So that means if you got on at, say, 10 p.m. at night for a transatlantic flight and your arrival time at your destination is in the evening time, that means you don't want to sleep before landing because you're going to have a little bit more energy. And then you need to get into the sleep mode when you arrive. So that's not going to help you. So what you want to do is sleep in the first half of your flight, wake up in the middle so that you're wide awake and that you're tired when you land. So then you can then go to sleep. So it's a little counterintuitive to how they serve you on the flights, but that is recommended. And actually, we also know that by studies that works, and that's why the new Dreamliner has these window screens that you can set according to your desired destination. So here are some tips that are very common in how to prevent or reduce jet lag. Staying hydrated is very, very important. We know that getting dehydrated impacts our ability to sleep. Limiting caffeine and alcohol on the flight is very important, unless you're using those to at least the caffeine to then simulate your destination. Definitely take melatonin according to that, where your sleep cycle is upon your destination, so that if you are having trouble, say you got on a morning flight and you needed to go to sleep and you're wide awake here, then you may want to take melatonin in the first hours of your flight so that you can then start and make everything darker in your seated area so that you can get to sleep. Enjoy sunlight if it's available upon arrival. Definitely wear light and loose layers of clothing. And the reason is to not only to be comfortable, but I also for DVT prevention so that you don't get blood clots. If you can, and I strongly recommend this, if you are changing planes at an international airport, take a shower. That really gets you rehydrated. And they have, for minimal cost, public showers that they give you a towel. So just take a little mini change of clothing in your carry-on bag. And it really, really helps upon arrival, especially if you have to have energy. And it makes a big difference. Take walks on the plane if you need it to stay awake. And of course, try to eat light. And we'll talk about what diet can do in making us not sleep well. So the big topic for today is insomnia. 30 to 40% of us, and it's sometimes up to 50% of us, will experience insomnia. And quote unquote, 40% of older people, I think over age 50, will experience insomnia. And that means that we have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep or waking up in the middle of the night. 24% of teens develop insomnia. 50% of pregnant women have complaints of difficulty sleeping. And menopause is a huge source of difficulty sleeping. And for pregnant women in menopause, these are hormonal factors, as we saw in the circadian rhythm, how different production of hormones can be affected and how body temperature can affect our ability to sleep. And that's a big component for women. So what are some other causes of insomnia? Stress, blue light. So computer screens, and the next slide, I'll discuss that a little bit more. Alcohol, smoking, caffeine. These are sometimes the nighttime. Historically, these were the evening rituals. Have a big meal, have a cup of coffee, have some wine with dinner, have a cup of coffee and a cigarette after. And all of those are sleep disruptors. A heavy meal also can increase our body temperature and make it hard to go to sleep, because when we have a heavy meal, it takes more energy to digest and more heat is generated in our body. Certain medicines are sleep disruptors, especially if they are stimulants. Environmental factors such as the temperature or light, which I alluded to. And then if you're uncomfortable or you're in pain, those are definite known sleep disruptors. So let's talk about light. You may not know that, but even though these new LED lights are environmentally friendly and save energy, they are horrible in that they emit blue light. And the blue light signals in our body that it's still daytime and it keeps us awake. Now, if you are watching TV, and if you guys are watching any TV shows that have commercials, I would like you to notice that all the commercials are practically white backgrounds or white kitchens, or like the Progressive commercials, everybody's wearing white. They are actually brighter because they want to get our attention. And especially if you're watching TV before going to sleep and you've got kind of some boring dark show, and then suddenly there's these white commercials, they're stimulating you and they're going to keep you awake. So you're going to want to try to minimize any kind of screen time. There are some blue light glasses, and I'm just going to get up and get them. That you can order from Amazon.com if you're going to be looking at your screen, and it's highly recommended that you, and they're a good set of glasses are about $80, and you can wear them and they will filter out. So right now I just put these glasses on and my screen went from white to yellowish, and it's more soothing to your eyes. And this is Mad Eyes from Amazon, and they are blue light protectors. You will start, these are also how, I also bought these for my daughter who is in law school and they're going virtually, and she's starting to get Zoom headaches, Zoom eye twitching. And so I think this is very important for us to consider. Okay, now I'm back to white light. So if you're in front of screens a lot, which a lot of us are, I recommend them. And it doesn't change your vision. So everything we're looking at looks the same, and it's much more soothing to your eyes. So the pineal, if we have the blue light, we stop making melatonin. We don't get the melatonin that production at 9 p.m. that I showed you in our 24-hour cycle, and we don't get the sleep that we need. And then over time, if we keep doing this and cutting down our melatonin production abilities, then we're gonna move our sleep phase to midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and then we'll just never feel like we're getting enough sleep. So it's an interesting phenomenon, trying to save the environment or save our sleep. So protecting yourself from blue light, you can replace the light in your bedroom from LED to a red, yellow light. Avoid looking at bright screens 2 hours or 3 hours before bedtime. If you're working night shift, wear the blue blocking glasses. Get lots of exercise and daylight during the day to help you get sleep at night. So many people say, well, just give me a sleeping pill, and that will trigger my habit. Well, I hope after seeing what happens in our body clock and the need for our hormone cycles at night, I hope I've convinced you that a sleeping pill would be a sleep disruptor, not help us in any of those ways. Studies after studies have shown that taking these pills can increase our risk for falls, sleepiness the next day. It can become habituating. It can cause a reflex insomnia if you don't take it the next day. So then that makes you want it the next day. Memory loss. And now the FDA has a black box warning for unintentional sleep behaviors if we take the Z drugs. And the Z drugs are zolpidem, which is Ambien, zolpidem, which is Belsomra, and ezopicline, which is Lunesta. And they are okay, say if you needed it for an emergency for jet lag. It's okay, so that you can then get back into your rhythm. But just know that if you took one, you still are at risk for this black box warning of sleep behaviors. And I don't know if I have this on the next slide. Yeah. So, and we can talk a little bit about what are just the side effects of Ambien. The sleep behaviors is an interesting phenomenon that the FDA received reports of. And one of the most famous cases is one of the Kennedys had taken an Ambien and in the middle of the night had driven in front of the White House through the barricades. And they said the cause was Ambien. And at the time we're like, no, that's nuts. But it had been reported at that time. Since that time, we know more and more reports of it. Even on Coronado, we have had people experience this where they, in the middle of the night, they'll get up and get in their car and drive and sideswipe 3 others parked on the road, and go back to sleep and not even know that happened. Other behaviors include going outside in their pajamas, gardening in the middle of the night. In their mind, they think it's daytime. So these are, and then they go back to sleep and don't even know it happened. This can happen with the first dose of Ambien or those types of drugs, or even if you've been on it a long, long time. It's highly unpredictable. And that's why the FDA put the black box warning. It was designed so that it wasn't like the barbiturates and the benzodiazepines that were used previously that were known to be addictive. But we now know that it can cause a rapid heartbeat, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, loss of appetite, decreases our vision. It can cause muscle cramps, slows the breathing rates, which does concern me if you have sleep apnea. Nightmares can occur, memory loss, inability to concentrate, the disorientation. You can get a flattened affect. Depression or suicidal thoughts can occur. And then confusion, dizziness, aggression, and over time habituation and addiction. Also, the other effects of Ambien is that sometimes people will duplicate sleeping medication. So they'll take Ambien and they'd already gotten used to a Tylenol PM. And that adds to all of these different side effects. What can we do if we are taking one of these drugs or the Z drugs or any other sleeping pill? Gradually wean from the medication because you don't want to disorient the mind, and I can help you with that. But there's an entire field dedicated to helping with sleep behaviors and our thoughts about sleep, and it's called cognitive behavioral therapy. And there are psychologists who work on that, who work on trying to get us out of our sleep anxiety, because there's a real anxiety that develops when we think we're not going to get a good night's sleep. And how to get our brain relaxed, how to get our muscles relaxed, how to have some healthy thoughts, or if we do tend to run anxious. And right now, I think The world is making us anxious with everything that's going on. And I'm not surprised if everyone is losing a little bit of sleep, because I think we all are caring people and we're thoughtful people. And if we read the news before going to bed, we may be a little anxious. So there's ways to address that, and that's a whole separate topic that we can discuss in the future. But if in our 20-minute visit I say let's refer you to cognitive behavioral therapy, it's because we want to open that big box for you. There are a couple of sleep disorders that are treated by two things: light therapy and timed melatonin therapy. And this will require a much deeper dive into your sleep. And these are also fall in the circadian rhythm sleep disorders. And one is delayed sleep or wake phase, where you are either going to sleep super late and then you wake up earlier than you want to, or later than you want to, or advanced where you only can go to bed at 2 in the morning and then you can only sleep until 6 a.m. And then there's those who just their clock is completely off, like people who are visually impaired, and they have what's called a non-24-hour sleep disorder. So for those folks, we have to provide timed light. So say that you're going to sleep at a time that you don't want later in the night, and then you're waking up later than you want. There is light box therapy that you would give that person in the morning, not at night. And so the timing of that will depend on your sleep phases and how we move your sleep phase. And that has to be done very gingerly. It requires a sleep diary. So when I request a sleep diary from folks, just say, what time are you going to sleep? What time do you wake up? And we map that out to see, are you one of these delayed sleep phase, advanced sleep, or a non-24-hour? When did you take naps? It helps us figure this out, because the treatment isn't just taking a melatonin before a couple hours before bedtime. It may be timed melatonin starting at maybe 3 or 4 p.m. to start building up your levels. We can test some melatonin levels in people. So we can figure this out scientifically and then do some work. So I just touch on this so that we can, even though seems like an easy conversation, it's a deeper conversation. So daylight savings time is here. It just started in 1966. It's not a healthy practice. Studies are showing that after daylight savings time, we tend to gain a little bit more weight. We have an increased risk there's more heart attacks and strokes noted. Statistically, we just see that right in the week after daylight savings time. And Arizona, Hawaii, Puerto Rico, US Virgin Islands don't practice daylight savings time. 32 other states have pursued legislation to stop it. And it's because of the health impact that we see following daylight savings time every year. So what can we do? We've talked about sleep hygiene in detail. Alcohol is a known sleep disruptor. So tonight I recommend not drinking alcohol. Definitely avoid caffeine before bedtime. And I've always advised folks not to drink caffeine after about noon or even 2 p.m. because many of us are very sensitive to caffeine, and that effect will linger about 8 to 10 hours in most of us. And so if you're drinking caffeine at 3 p.m. even if it's an iced tea for a late lunch, you may not be able to go to bed around 10 p.m. when you want to go to sleep. Establish a consistent sleep routine, which is something that we should always do. gradually alter your bedtime. So a few days before the transition, so it's kind of too late right now. Start setting your alarm clock a little bit earlier so that you can adjust to this transition. Spend times outdoors today. So get light, lots of light today. And then if you need to nap tomorrow, it's okay. But no longer than 20 minutes. Sleep hygiene, how to sleep like a baby. Establish a set bedtime and stick to it, even on weekends, like I just mentioned. Maintain a comfortable temperature in the room and low light levels in your bedroom. As mentioned, screen ban on all your electronics, phones, iPads, computer. Get the TV screen out of your bedroom if it's there. We talked about caffeine, alcohol, large meals, and how that it can disrupt our sleep. Most of you aren't smoking, so it's not going to affect us. Exercise is very, very important during the daytime because it can help our muscles perceive a fatigue and relax at night. Here are some vitamins, minerals. Now I'm opening it up to what you can do in your diet and that can help promote sleep. And these are the things that if you're going to choose your menu at night, you may want to put these into your dinner. And most of these are in the Mediterranean diet, except for turkey. These are the 4 main vitamins and minerals that will help, that are the sleep aids, supplements, so to speak. Tryptophan is an amino acid and a naturally occurring substance in many of these foods, and it helps promote the production of melatonin in our body. As you notice, at Thanksgiving afternoon, everybody's dozing off, and that's because, or after Thanksgiving meals, that's because turkey is probably the highest meat that has tryptophan. So if you guys want to have a little bit of turkey at night, that will definitely get you sleepy. Low-fat yogurt, milk, cheeses, also high in tryptophan as well as calcium. Seafood, nuts and seeds, as I mentioned before, helps with our melatonin production. And calcium, surprisingly, helps with muscle relaxation. And so that's why calcium is considered a sleep nutrient. Magnesium, which can be found in dark leafy greens, nuts and seeds. I see folks are writing this down, but please don't worry because this is all going to be on the recording and posted, so you can pause it, keep it, take pictures of it. Bananas are a very rich source of magnesium. And also, if you go to the store, you can buy calcium magnesium as a combination. And 1 CalMag taken at night will also minimize night cramps, supposedly. I know many of you have tried that and it doesn't work as efficiently. Let me know if you're going to supplement calcium and magnesium, because people with kidney issues or heart disease issues, I may not want on extra calcium because it can cause kidney stones and blockage of arteries. B6 is an important component of our micronutrients that will help promote formation of tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, serotonin. So flaxseed, pistachio nuts, dried prunes, avocado, as mentioned, and magnesium. So if you can sense that all of these also have overlap. Dried prunes at night, not a bad idea, because then you can have your morning bowel movement. So there's a lot of benefit on just using food as medicine. And if you make these choices and incorporate them into dinner, you may get a good night's sleep. Drinks that are good for sleep. Warm milk. Especially if you get up in the middle of the night for some reason and you want to lull yourself back to sleep, drinking a little warm milk will help. or a little bit of yogurt. Almond milk is high in magnesium, so that may be something you can drink before going to sleep. Valerian root tea and chamomile tea are both natural sleep inducers. Tart cherry juice, if you want to drink that in the evening. Passion fruit tea. The passion fruit flower is high in GABA, which is a hormone that is needed to then trigger the melatonin in our system. And so GABA is an important sleep aid. Peppermint tea. Now, that seems counterintuitive because it seems stimulating. Well, peppermint is, and any of the mints are muscle relaxants. So that helps us ease into sleep. And hops has a natural component in there that will induce sleep. So ever since the 1900s, they were medicinally providing hops for insomnia. Herbs and scents that can be used are lavender, which you can use in your baths, lotions, candles, and they help induce sleep. Warm baths have been shown just as good as the Tylenol PM in studies. Valerian, passion flower, as I mentioned, ashwagandha, which is kind of the new Ayurvedic buzzword, but that has a natural sleep substance in there, in that herb, and it is used commonly as a sleep inducer. The California poppy and holy basil. So if you find those in teas, you can steep them for about 20 minutes in boiling water and drink that. All of these, you can have up to 3 cups, no more than that, in a 24-hour period. And then Boney's has all of this. Passion flower, I am growing passion fruits. If anybody wants, my flowers aren't blooming, but if anybody wants to try the fresh flower, let me know today and I'll pluck some for you. But I don't know, I haven't tried it personally because I can tell you I'm so busy, I'm falling asleep like a rock every night. The latest buzzword, CBD oil. Many people are asking me about this. And the story is, it's the grandchildren are suggesting it to the grandparents, and it's skipping generations, and grandparents are trying this. What is it, and what about CBD? Now, CBD comes from the marijuana plant. We've got to admit where it comes from, even though it's retitled CBD. And it is derived from the cannabis plant, and it says it's got the THC removed from it, so it's considered the active ingredient, so it won't get you high. But if it affects your brain enough to lull you to sleep and relax you, it's doing something neurologically. And I do see that folks I've seen the night after or the morning after they've had some CBD, depending on the doses, may have a glassy-eyed look. I do find that it may, this is just now my experience and anecdote, studies are still being done right now because remember, this was just legalized here a year ago. So these studies, and it's not federally approved to research marijuana, so we don't have long-term evaluations, and folks are looking at this. But will it impact our memory? I think it might, because anything that is putting our brain to sleep can put our memory filing abilities to sleep. So folks may have a little bit of confusion the next day. But if you need it for pain and anxiety, it may be promising, but it may be habituating. What are the long-term effects? Is it going to be the same as Tylenol PM and all the other sleeping pills that can then impair our memory and cause confusion long-term? 10, 20 years of use is what we don't have that data. Doses vary. There's gummy bears that are with 5 milligrams of CBD to oils that have 1,600 milligrams. And since it's an unregulated industry, nobody knows how much is enough. Nobody knows exactly what the concentrates are. Some of them have THC mixed in them. The broad spectrum CBD have a little bit more in them. So we just have to be careful. And here's some of the terminology used on the packaging that I share with you. I'm always nervous about anything that can impair our mental functioning. That's just my bias, but I don't mind CBD when it's applied topically to the joints or to the muscles, because then it's not going to get to our brain as easily. And I know that folks are using that for knee pain or arthritis pain on their back or hands, and they have found benefit. And it does get absorbed through the skin and goes directly to the site you want it at. So if you are going to use it and your sleep is being disrupted by pain, that's where I would recommend it. The sources of information for today's talk were the National Sleep Foundation, Stanford Health, Harvard Health, the NIH, FDA. AlaskaSleep.com has a great website, and Healthline has some great tips. So if anybody, there's tons of information on the website. In fact, so much so that I'm really glad that I put this talk together for you, because it's really hard to filter the noise out of what's on the website. So with that, I'd like to switch gears to our usual COVID-19 update. This is fresh off the press from last night. This is the map of the United States and top 50 confirmed cases by county. And if you look at California, and LA is the highest, but this is the map of the United States and how much of all of this area is turning orange and red, and in areas where on a good day they don't have a lot of hospital capacity, we're hearing about hospitals getting full. Last night at about yesterday, the state of Utah sent out an emergency alert to every single person in the state, saying that almost every county is a high transmission area. Hospitals are nearly overwhelmed. I mean, I've got a conference call at 1 o'clock. This is distressing just all of us across the country in pulmonary critical care. And so they are now having the mask order. I don't think this surprises us here, because we've been in a mask order since the get-go. But it's hard for us to imagine anywhere else not having mask mandates. But if you look at us here in California, we've gotten used to living in the highest zone, and we've lulled ourselves into an area of safety. And we think we're doing pretty well in San Diego. Our mortality rates are the lowest. We figured out a way to take care of people without becoming overwhelmed, but cases are starting to rise. And I have to tell you, on a personal note, two of my professional pulmonary critical care colleagues and a disaster planner are right now suffering from COVID. One has been exposed by virtue of their grandchild living in their home. And so these are healthcare workers. 1 in 6 cases of COVID are in healthcare workers. It's kind of the biggest secret there. And they are frontline healthcare workers in the ICUs, in the emergency rooms, in triage areas. So that is the reason our hospitals are being overwhelmed, is because we don't have enough staff. We have plenty of ventilators, just not enough people to run them. And so that's an important aspect that we have to keep in mind. And we're talking about it, but I don't know how that information is filtering to you all. So I figured you guys should hear it from me. I know it's hard. We've all been in lockdown and we're getting antsy. We need to have things on our calendar to give us hope. Thanksgiving is going to be very isolating, and I want people to feel okay. Testing is not perfect, but if somebody has been quarantined and they want to just make sure that they are negative, I was thinking of opening up just a test day on the 23rd, and then if everybody can then just stay quarantined. And so then you know you're negative. If you want to get together with one other family group, we can do that. And I'll email you all if and when, depending on what the next couple, 3 weeks look like here. We may not be able to do any of that. Right now, I found out from our hospital system that we are short supply of reagents. We're only allowed a certain X number of tests a day because we don't have enough reagents to run the PCRs. I am looking into sharing a system with Dr. Petrovich, where we can do a rapid flu and a rapid COVID test. So if anybody develops symptoms, and we're waiting for the machine to arrive, so within the next week or two. So hopefully we won't then impact the hospital system's reagent supply, and we can then get another pipeline going. The CDC now has defined exposure as a total of 15 minutes with somebody who is a known COVID positive within a 24-hour period. So it's not 15 minutes face to face all at once. So even if that person was positive and you were in and out of their vicinity every 5-10, for 5-minute breaks in a 24-hour period, that is exposure. So that's enough for you to come to me to say, hey, I need testing. On a flip side, vaccine. I don't know if many of you know that I am a subject for the Moderna vaccine trial. I went for my 3rd visit yesterday, and speaking to the doc, it looks like data will come out in late November about the Moderna efficacy of the vaccine. And it's not a panacea. I realized even when you don't know if you've gotten the real thing or not, so you imagine that you might have gotten the vaccine. You feel like you've got the secret superpower. But I realized it's not going to make me go out without a mask or even a shield, because number one, I don't even want to get a little bit of mild COVID. And two, I don't want to get it and then transmit it to somebody who may not have received the vaccine. So it's not going to unmask me. It may not make us return completely to normal. And so I realized that going through that thought process, I should start preparing all of you that even if we get the vaccine in February, March, we're still going to be wearing our masks. And we should prepare ourselves mentally for this modified behavior. Because there will be people out there that don't get the vaccine. We may not have enough. We won't be wearing I've gotten the vaccine hats around. So, we're going to still be protecting each other. And when I wear my mask and shield, it's to protect you. So that concludes today's hour. Thank you very, very much for your time and attention. Wishing you all a safe and happy holiday season. I've got some comments in the chat. One was in view of the increasing COVID cases with K through 12 students, as well as college students who contribute, what are the actions taken by our county public health officer to discourage in-person classes, and especially for special needs students. I have not spoken to Dr. Wooten on this topic, and I haven't kept up on the back door chatter, but I could email a colleague who is advising county. She's an infectious disease specialist, and get back to you on that. Our youth, there's a tremendous downside for our special needs students, as well as a lot of students. I don't know if I mentioned it in our previous lectures, but the public school system has an infrastructure in place that identifies victims of abuse. And early in the pandemic, there was the pediatric populations in the emergency rooms were seeing child abuse in cases of such severity that they had never seen before, and in numbers. And those are those that just made it to the emergency room. They suspected that a lot more was going on, because now these kids were locked in with the perpetrators. And so when people are saying we got to get the kids to school, publicly, our officers are saying that it is for the safety and well-being of a very vulnerable group of children whose safety net is the school. Trying to isolate those kids into safety pods and with good behaviors and masking is something that's very important. Children and suicide risks are rising, depression in our college kids are rising. So the mental health impact on our kids may last a long time, and that is a concern. So I know that is in the public health officer's mind in answer to that question. Whether they need to go back to remote learning, I don't. That's going to become a different topic. I know, based on my daughter's experience, Stanford is testing once a week, and they're feeling secure with their negative testing pods. Northeastern is twice a week. They have a 99.9 negative rate. Kids have been expelled if they've gone to a party. So I know universities have different policies, but they're becoming very active. Dr. Murray had suggested a Why We Sleep book, and it emphasizes the dangers of sleep deprivation. And thanks for pointing that out. Many people say, well, what if I don't get enough sleep, and how do we reset the clock? They're worried because they need the Ambien the next day. Studies have shown that after about 3 days, your body can't help but want to fall asleep. So sometimes we're like, I haven't slept for 3 days. I gotta take that pill. By the third day, you're gonna sleep no matter what. So that if you've been on any of these sleep aids, you're gonna get that reflex insomnia that will automatically happen. It's almost like a withdrawal from the sleep medicine. It makes you hyper awake. And you're like, I gotta have something. And then you're gonna be awake that second night, but by the third night, you will fall asleep. So don't worry. Is the 15-minute time period considered an exposure with or without a mask, or either way? The 15-minute time period is without a mask. But if you've had a mask on and you've still been exposed and you want to be tested, I advise that, because masks aren't perfect. If you've had a close contact, I advise that. Higher than anticipated flu and COVID as temperatures decrease. Every year, I just lose it over flu, because I am pulling every trick out of my hat to keep folks going all year long. Sometimes we are spending $100,000 a year on medicines for complex pulmonary issues, and then flu season happens, and we've gotten used to this accepted mortality rate that happens with flu. We know that when kids are in school, viruses mix and they bring them home. And then a lot of people then go to work with symptoms and then spread flu around. And everybody says, well, I got the flu shot, so this isn't the flu. Well, as in our prior flu talk last year, it doesn't stop the virus from landing, doing its a little bit of runny nose, a sore throat, your body's fighting it. But in that war that you're waging with that flu virus, you're still transmitting it to others. So when we are with each other, all these viruses are going to mix. Last week, our pediatric colleagues are seeing an uptick in respiratory viruses, kids coming in with viral symptoms, fevers, cough, runny nose. So we should probably find out next week when our flu surveillance, right now, everybody who comes in with symptoms, I'm testing you guys for flu as well as COVID, as well as a viral panel. That includes RSV, metapneumovirus, parainfluenza virus, and even Bordetella, which is not a virus. But we're doing these things so that if there's something we can treat, we'll treat. But we're looking. So in answer to your question, the Southern Hemisphere did not have much of a flu season because they were all masked and very diligent. But given our population behaviors, we may see a regular flu season. If we get flu and COVID together, that's frightening to me as a clinician, and that's what we're all talking about. That's why I've been getting you guys your Tamiflu supply ahead of time as much as I can. So if you guys haven't gotten it, let me know. So if you're pop flu positive, you can take it and we can at least eliminate that risk for you. And so that's it on the flu COVID. I haven't heard of any combined cases just yet in San Diego County. And I really appreciate all of you. And then a weighted blanket is also something that can help lull us to sleep. And a lot of people are finding that's very useful. So thank you for reminding me about that. And then I will, folks had wanted to know the brand of the blue light blocking glass. And this is MADE Eyes from Amazon.com. So sorry. And it really does work. And it's turned the screen into a nice light yellow, and you'll get adjusted to it, and it will minimize the headaches. Oh, and thank you for this next question. Maximum dose for melatonin. Absolutely. So we are reducing our melatonin dose requirements to no more than 5 milligrams. Because if you do too much melatonin, you can, especially if you're over the age of 60, you will get sleep hallucinations and nightmares and vivid dreams, which can be very uncomfortable. And also, you may actually shut off your own melatonin production. So 1 to 3 milligrams is a nice sweet spot, 5 milligrams at most. Thank you for that question.